Everybody, it's the Trout, and welcome to the Trout Show. Thanks for joining us today. Today we go to New York City, where I interview a independent artist known as Golden, and we'll get to that part later during the show. She started out as a classical pianist at a very young age. Here's a picture of her where she's doing a recital, and that wasn't enough. She decided she wanted to play banjo of all things, and then she said, I don't want to do that either. And she grew up, she found some things like Ramones and music like that and said, that's what I want to play, is more of that. But then she decided, I think I'm going to move to Nashville. She got her degree in Nashville and became involved with the RCA studio there, where she helped run one of the big studios there. But that wasn't enough either for her. She decided, hey, I need to go to New York City, put my roots in, and start doing my own music thing, which is exactly what Golden did. And I talked to her about her life, but also her career and her music that you're going to hear during this video, and I hope you enjoy it. She does all the instruments. And the interesting thing about it is she learned and taught herself most everything when it comes to knowing how to record. She did everything except a few things she took to one of the most iconic studios in New York City, which is Electric Lady Studios, and she talks about that later. If you don't know what Electric Lady Studios are, that's a studio that Jimi Hendrix built back in the 60s. It's very iconic. But she will talk about that too, which is very interesting too, about how she got involved with that studio. But the most interesting thing for me is her music. She considers it pop. You consider whatever you want, but I like it. And I think you'll like it too when you sit back and listen to or watch this episode of The Trout Show with Golden. But before we get there, remember, if you like this channel, please give me a thumbs up or subscribe. Give me a thumbs up for this video. I'd appreciate it very, very much. It helps us get more people just like you, that if you like the music, we can find more great artists to interview. So up next, a gal named Golden with her music just for you and all her fans. That's next on The Trout Show.
Sometimes I'm drifting in a simple world, like a country stream, sleep to discussion, and I'm the self-content. I see you smile, drifting like a country stream, my little girl, precious and pure, as I fall back in the softness and sleep. Caress me with simple love, possess me with simple love, special simple. Caress me with simple love, possess me with simple love. Place becomes time, space becomes mine, and always like this flow. Green like a entry dream, you surround me and cover me, protect me and caress me with that special simple love.
When you grow up in Los Angeles and go to public high school,
Yep.
whether it's the fact that many of the students are actors or there's just a Hollywood glow over the whole thing, I just wanted to get out of the networky, it's like too much sunshine up their butt a little bit.
It's the phoniness.
And I went to Nashville because I was curious, like where songs actually started. And after I kind of burned out there, I remember in Nashville, we had this joke. A friend of mine there was an era, when they had the black t-shirt that had a sentence on it, everyone was wearing a t-shirt with a sentence on it. Yeah. And ours was, I'm sorry, I couldn't come to your show, because everyone in Nashville is a musician. So they can't come to your gigs. It's just musicians. There's not a lot of fans.
I actually understand
the fans come to visit.
I
started touring up in New York a lot just because it was close enough to drive. And I remember the first handful of shows I played in New York City, I said to myself, wow, I think people are actually here because they want to see music and they like art and they're here to see art.
Yeah.
And I do feel like in general, New York City has probably the most like creative and artistic, and maybe some people might call that weird, but unique people in the world doing unique things. So, and at that point, where else am I going to go? I've connected with a lot of engineers and producers in studios, just fronting with, hey, I love to like take come see this space and like check it out and talk
Yeah.
about using it. And I do it to tons of studios that I know I definitely can't afford.
Ford. Yeah.
But then you'll end up meeting, because I'm a young
Oh,
kid,
sure.
young kid too. I'll meet like the kid engineer and be like, hey, let's hang out. And then, I'll get the call when there's nothing going on in the studio and work under the table. And that's kind of how I built Golden, is sort of you fake it till you make it kind of, but you'd be like, yeah, like I love the formal tour. Like just they don't know that you don't have the money. Just go
No.
go meet the people, go see the space. It's a good idea.
So you came to New York 12 years ago almost. Were you, were
Yep.
you, your music's not country. You don't do country now.
No,
Um,
I kind of I blame it on, so I'm a leap year baby, I was born on February 29th. So, God and the whole universe was like, let's just make sure she's different. So I kind of have it, they needed a guarantee,
yeah.
no matter what temptations to look, be like a normal girl would be like. But
Yep.
I I've gone through like many phases because of that. I think kind of like a cat with nine lives. So, you know, I I started on classical piano when I was four,
I remember you telling me that
and
before. Yeah.
there's that whole past. But and I'm kind of interesting, I think, because I've never thought about doing anything else, and whether it's because it's all I want to do or the fact that kind of like taking over the family farm, it was what my parents told me, that the first thing my parents told me to do. My mom would make me practice for an hour a day. It was like military training, but just for classical piano. And I also had a
Yeah.
really great teacher, which made a really big impact on me. But the second I turned 12, I found the Ramones, and the Clash and T Rex and Bowie. And so, then I became a punk kid, because when you're like a different kid, you find sort
Oh,
of
yeah.
solidarity and being
Yeah.
different. So
Yep.
I was, from 12 to about middle of high school, I was, always teaching my girlfriends how to play their other instruments and starting all girl punk bands, because it's too, when you're 13, no boys want a girl in their band. And
Mm.
then, by the time I was in like maybe sophomore, junior year of high school, I found Woody Guthrie, which was a big game changer for me. And that's kind of, I think, what led me ultimately to Nashville and stuff, and that country tradition, and
Hmm.
Dylan as well, and Neil Young. I was like, oh, I can just play the guitar, like I can play guitar and be a solo artist. Like I don't have to be in a band. This is like 15, 16-year-old Bailey still
Right.
figuring out how the
Yeah.
world works.
Yeah.
And so I got like, could like in senior year of high school, I saved up all my money for a few years and got my first like vintage guitar. It was like I think it was a 68 LGO, which is like the small body mahogany Gibson acoustic guitar, like a
Hmm. Hmm.
14-inch body. And, this is, I don't know if you know, but LG in the Gibson world and acoustic guitars means lady guitar, because they're like slightly smaller than a J50 or a
Yeah.
J45, like
Yeah.
a traditional flat top. And I got the harmonica thing, and I started like learning Woody
Oh,
Guthrie
wow.
songs
Cool.
and doing
You
that
were
whole
doing all
thing.
of
And
it.
that was, freshman year and in freshman year in college. And then I got really into old time music. Like if you accidentally search my name on Google, there might be some weird banjo videos of me with way too many views. Went from punk to the banjo, and then kind of got bored with that. Also got very bored with my parents introducing me as, this is my daughter Bailey who plays the banjo. I was like a Deliverance character or something, or some kind of novelty. And I also like, it's not a, I grew up playing classical piano, and so when I started Golden, I got rid of a lot of my guitars, or all of them really at first, and went back to the keys. I have a Moog Rogue like bass synth from the 80s behind me, or behind the camera,
Oh, yeah.
and a bunch of other
All the, is
synths and
that got all the
stuff. But
chords and everything that you had to plug in?
that one's not a modular one,
Oh,
but I've
okay.
had a few. I'm not like whether it's through the cost ratio or time ratio, because I'm a songwriter and a singer, I think before a producer, it's just it allows yourself to go into this abyss of being like, well, let me do it like this, or let me change the delay like this, or let me
Yeah,
change
and
the toms
see,
to be like that, and then you spend way too much time on the song that
yeah,
way.
this project you're working on or still working on, I assume, or know the one
Mhm.
song, but all that stuff. What is it that you want to do? I mean, it took you how much did when you went to record, where did you record this at? Was it Nashville, wasn't it? Did you record in Nashville? I know somebody was there at your
No,
recording.
no, no. I left Nashville, in 2011 or
Okay,
whatever.
yeah,
But
okay.
and although like I've been back to visit, it's like you were saying, it's not economical to like move a bunch of
Yeah,
musicians and put them up in rooms. Like, and I because I am independent, everything is on my one singular back. So I actually, do everything out of necessity instead of choice at this point in my career. And I think, when I first started Golden, I didn't know how to record. That's a funny thing. I even managed RCA Studio B, the first recording studio in Nashville. And I was too busy convincing my engineering homies that, I was studying like, English and history, and all the engineering students, I would hit them up and get them to come and record me. Like there was no part of me that was interested in learning how to record. I just wanted
right,
to play.
right.
I've
Well, I
always been a
understand. I
player since I
understand
was
that,
a
sure.
kid.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think when I started Golden, I was expecting to have at least an engineer, or ideally a producer, and that's what landed me at Electric Lady because I had a lot of friends who interned there. When I first moved to New York, one of my good friends, Grant, introduced me to Phil Jolie, who was a chief engineer there for 10 years. And I would just literally hang out. Like I was really good at being a fly on the wall. And so whether it's a changeover or there's some empty time, and I would just be flexible. If anyone could record for 30 minutes, I'd be there in 2 seconds, like just let me know.
yeah,
But a lot of my friends, it's Phil Jolie, Brandon Boast, and Joe Visciano. It's particularly also my friend Caleb Labin. They all worked at Electric Lady at different points. But all these guys are, Joe, for example, who really taught me everything I know in Pro Tools. Lived with U2 for 3 to 6 months in Ireland at their house, engineering them. So these guys are doing Springsteen and Frank Ocean and
yeah,
Adele, and
yeah.
we would be in the middle of tracking vocals, and Frank Ocean called one of them. They would be out of the door in an Uber before I was finishing my last phrase. And so they would teach me, like, here's how to play list a track, like, here's how to
Yeah,
do this, here's how to do this, keep
yeah.
going, we'll keep it going. Because I didn't have any money. Like, I wasn't paying them. Like, we were all doing it for fun and
Yeah.
because they believed in it. But, and then towards the end of it all, it just, I think because of my classical music background, like, one
Hmm.
thing that is unfortunately or fortunately, depending on the way you look at it, I can hear every note and I care about every note and every time and every moment. So I think where most singers or songwriters might not understand like what note the bass should be, like I just hear all that stuff. I always joke with people, my if I was a DJ, my DJ name would be Baby Beethoven. It's a lot of I've clocked a lot of hours on that piano. So, and I put the whole production here, and then I have to extrapolate it a little bit. And okay, like this note goes to the bass, and this goes to the pad, and this
Well,
goes
that's your
to the
classically
arpeggiated
trained.
synth, and
Yeah.
but because of that, it's often hard to find a producer that has a better idea than me, unfortunately.
Well, I
So
don't
I,
think,
I kind of ended up there out of necessity, and sure,
yeah.
and I have so many friends. You have so many peers in this world, especially as an emerging artist, and I have so many friends that if I could just find that producer, if I could just find that mixer, if
Mhm.
I could just find that manager, all my problems will be solved.
Yeah.
And then pull yourself up by your own
Yeah.
bootstraps.
Yep.
Like, don't let people hold you. And I was like, I hated the idea of things holding me back. And I could do this.
You know, an interesting thing for me, and I'd forgotten about your experience at Electric Lady because we had that conversation several months ago,
Hmm.
how that was so famous years ago. And then it went into not looking good, like,
Disarray
yeah,
and like
disarray,
the
being
late
there.
in like the 80s and 90s, it was really bad. Yeah.
And then somebody came in there and fixed it back up. And now is
Yeah,
it?
so Lee Foster, and Lee is the current manager, and he was kind of the brill he started super humble as like an intern. I don't remember what year, but worked his way up from the bottom, and the place was falling apart, and somehow he figured out a way to connect with some, for lack of a better word, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch type of person, investor dude, who loves music,
Yeah.
and got him to be like, I'll run the studio, like I will this,
Yeah.
and if you like advance me the funds to like turn it around.
Sure.
And that's what's going on today, which is cool. Lee's really responsible for saving the place in many, many, many ways.
Well, it's
Um,
an iconic studio. I mean, come on.
yeah, totally.
I mean, I don't care whether
I
you.
mean, it's definitely like a very magical place for me, because whether it's like, learning everything I know that I currently use in my career there, or to me, it was mostly impactful because, and this was just, I guess I did it by nature, but I knew, especially if I didn't have money and I had to get things done guerrilla style, I need to ultimately learn what a real session should look like. When you
Yeah.
open Pro Tools, like
Yeah.
what are the layers, how many tracks you got going, like where are the BGVs, what are the plugins that people are using.
Right.
And I'm probably in New York City, maybe the world, the 0.001% of artists using Pro Tools. Everyone who's another fellow artist or musician, they love their Logic and their Ableton.
Oh
But
yeah. Yeah.
being able to like go back and forth with my mixer or talk to my mastering engineer, and like I decided to take on the industry standard, not just try to like make some cool beats. And in general too, I think like that is a big difference between my perspective and a lot of my peers today, is understanding what needs to happen. At the end I always tell people it's just still just a pizza shop. You gotta,
Yep.
your pizza shop can be fancy, your pizzas are $35 on white tablecloths, or it can be one of these like little tiny places over in Flushing, Queens that has 20, 30 people lined up behind it, but it's just like hole in the wall. But
Right.
if the pizza's good, they'll come no matter what it looks like. So focus on making a good product, a product that people want. But I think a lot of people sort of get in their own head and think way too many steps in front of the first step, which is like, how do I actually make a song that people want to hear instead of just make a song.
Well, you made a comment. I just thought about this, and that is,
Hence the Beatles.
yeah, that's the Beatles. There is some greatness of doing stuff in your own place, but there's also, you said you were talking about Electric Lady Studios. There's a vibe to places.
Hmm.
And when I was in most of the shows, I went down to all the big famous ones that people still record at them, at Fame and places like that. And you go in, and I don't look at it as, Mick Jagger stood here. It just seems to have a certain vibe because
Energy, yeah.
there's an energy to it. And even though you probably have this happen to you just like I do, if I'm working on something and I finally fix it and I go, okay, I like what I did. But when you're in a studio, you have people saying, when you get better, it's almost like a crowd effect. Oh, I like that. That's good. That gives the energy. I think what you've
Mm.
done is really interesting. The fact that you've taken, because you're an interesting person, because obviously you're one of these people who's like, don't tell me I can't do it. I'll figure out how to do it. I can tell you that's the kind of person you are. I can see that.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sure your mom and dad had a great time with you. No, I can do it. You know, I can do that. No problem. Get out of the way. But the other thing you were talking about was, and all this going in and kind of staying back, because when you're in a room, let's say you're in the room and you're talking about U2, and Bono comes
Mhm.
in, and you can't become a fangirl or a fanboy. Oh my God, it's Bono. You just kind of sit back and go, let's see him work. Let's see what they actually do. Then you start
Mhm.
picking up on the nuances on it. But the other thing that's important too, and I don't do this, I just futz around it. People like you, and I've talked to other artists like you that have learned how to play piano at a young age, but they're classically trained. And I
Hmm.
think that helps you write songs better. Now I write everything on guitar because I'm a guitarist, but I admire people like yourself because I may add keyboards too, but it's very simple because I'm not a pianist.
Yeah,
But I think that's the
I
other thing
know.
that I think that helps is when you started out like you did and being browbeat to pick up and learn how to play that stuff because none of it's easy. And it's not like, a Beethoven wrote a chorus. I mean, he wrote two verses and a chorus and a bridge. And that's not the way
Okay,
they did
no.
it.
I had this really great piano teacher since I was 4 till I graduated high school. Her name was Svetlana Trensky, and she's like the director of teaching at the Disney Center now in downtown LA, I think. Crazy talented girl. And when I showed up, she was getting, I was 4 in a Snow White dress with like Dopey on the corner of the dress hanging out because of course that was my favorite elf or dwarf. But I love Dopey. But and she was like 35 getting her PhD from USC in, classical piano.
Right.
And she was the most consistent person in my life other than my folks, my sister, my entire life growing up, every week. And the coolest thing I think and the most impactful thing about that relationship was, early on, and I'm sure she could tell you better than me, but very early on, like elementary school days, she realized that I liked all the weird, twisted songs, like the minor chords and weird natural and flats and
Hmm.
diminished. And
Yep.
and her whole, we would always go through repertoire, Chopin, Beethoven, like all this stuff. And every time we had to start a new piece, she would bring 4 or 5 pieces and sit down. And, she basically tried to find the most like 4 or 5 effed up, minor, weird, contorted notes
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
different places and
Yeah.
different timings
Yeah.
that she would let me choose, but she would let me choose. And I got to pick what we played out of it all. I always had to play classical, like it had to be in a certain regiment, but she really fed my interest in melody and music, in that form. And also kind of in many ways, like developed a lot, I think, of my musical taste because, she saw it in me and then she would bring me these resources to go more into it and more into it. And, it's like, I feel like most people have that story of their crazy old lady piano teacher that was mean or like hit them with a stick. But I was like one of the lucky ones that got the coolest piano teacher you could ever have.
So when you talk to people about your music, what do you tell them? What do you say when say, well, what's your music like? What's your genre? I mean, you got to somewhat fit yourself in a box to a certain degree, but tell me what you tell people.
I tell them most of the time that it's classic pop for people who still have good taste. It's definitely not like Selena Gomez or Dua Lipa or any of these like
No.
crazy robot songs that are on the radio, but I definitely take much more of a John Lennon, Beach Boys, old school approach with it, So but at the end of the day, it's just pop songs, and that's the funny thing is, whether it's a high school kid, there are kids like in weird countries all over the world that are 14 years old and like golden, and then there's like older folks in their 50s or 60s that like golden, and I think I do focus on the song more than trying to, make some trendy production, like make something more timeless, because songs should
Yeah.
hold up. You want
Yeah.
even the recordings to hold up. There are
Right.
some songs that definitely don't hold up.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna do all that work and spend all that time and sweat and just like put yourself, this last song I recorded a whole entire orchestra. So whether it's like charting it out and deciding which viola or which violin played what note or timing them all together or EQing them and it's just like utter death.
Well,
for
but
love. But
you
it's
have to
like,
start out with a basically good product. You have to have
mhm.
something.
But
And
yeah, the song I think is the most
it has to
important
have some
thing,
glue in it
really.
because and that's kind of subjective. What do you prefer people to find? Well, your website's the easiest thing for
So
people.
yeah, so it's Girl Named Golden, technically is
Yeah.
the full phrase. So it's, all my social media handles, my URL, it's Girl Named Golden, you Girl Named Golden. Makes
Was
it
that your
easy.
idea or was it somebody else?
Well, at first it was golden, and I did, I have a history and English degree, and I kind of like a lot of stuff in general. Most of my decisions have more context and thought, I think, than others in that arena. But, um, I did my research and, I knew I wasn't competing with any other artist named Golden. But the one thing I missed was that when if you go to a record store, you go to the G's, right? You're not
Right.
and but if you go into the Google or the YouTube or Spotify or Apple search
Yeah.
bar, they don't just bring up artists, they also bring up songs
Yeah.
called Golden or albums called Golden.
Yeah.
So it became, the Harry Styles has a song called Golden. So obviously he's gonna have more
Yeah.
plays than me at this point. But I also felt that Golden sort of like sounded a little bit like a band, and especially whether it's the fact that unfortunately I do this all by myself. um I felt like that clarified this is a solo artist, even because I think one of my big problem is most people think I'm this like really big ship with all these like bandmates and all this
Well, that's
funding and
okay.
like
Let them
all
think
this
that.
stuff.
That's okay.
And I'm like, yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, let them think that.
But it's like I got to use my ladiness in the world. Yeah, I'm finishing the debut album that comes out in March. And while I'm doing that, sort of putting out some covers and other stuff in the meantime. It's like, to me, finishing an album is sort of like it's like graduating from middle school or high school. You have to like put the yearbook together and like get all the
Yes, you
photos
do.
and like do all the events, and it's like too much work to not do right by it. So
It takes
yeah,
time and it takes
yeah.
a lot of effort because because you're
Well,
talented.
and it's summer. I'm gonna be playing lots of shows this summer
Yeah,
and
so tell me a
all
little bit
that kind of
about what
stuff.
you do then. Tell me about your shows. Do you have a band? Do you just go out and do solo act? What do you do?
Um, Most of the time I play solo.
Okay.
Every once in a while I'll bring like one other person to kind of fill in some
And what
bass,
do you
or
play a guitar, piano? What do you do when you come play?
I have one other Wurlitzer that's actually at the studio that I do all my studio sessions at, which is called the Creamery. I keep it there because in New York City, how many Wurlitzers can you have in one room? But we call him Blue Boy, and it's a 140 Wurlitzer, which is like kind of the OG one that like Ray Charles used to play.
Ah,
This one has like a whole speaker system underneath it. There's like
right.
four
Yeah.
speakers and stuff, so that's not coming out of here. But I have one that's just like the tabletop, and I definitely like playing with other people, but based upon kind of my music, I tend to connect a lot with people in more of a intimate setting,
Sure.
and
I understand that.
I'll have the drums going and events going and like other stuff in the track and stuff going, but there's sort of a little bit of an intimate connection I can lock in with people that,
And
and just
what
whether
type of
it's
venues do you do? Restaurants with music, or you do a small venue? I mean, tell me a little bit about what
I
you're doing.
do mostly venues. I don't like to restaurant stuff, but
Yeah.
I've also been playing a lot of college campuses and stuff like
Okay.
that. I have a big following that is kind of the college age, college radio kid. And they're honestly, to me, when you compare playing a college campus show to these local venues like Bowery Ballroom, it's like only when I play at college campuses, like the kids are having fun, they're
Yeah.
running around, they're
Yeah.
like coming and engaging with you, and you play
Yeah.
places like Bowery Ballroom, and it's a bunch of like 35-year-old people kind of like judging you and kind of being like so I mean, which is fine, I'm fine with that too, but I do like the young kids, they're more on my wavelength energy wise.
So if you could wave a wand and could do anything and money was no object, what would you do with your music? What's your dream? What's
Wow,
your
that's a
big
good
dream?
question.
Do you have a big dream? Like I wanted, I mean, you did mention the Grammy word earlier. I did catch that.
Well, I mean, I definitely want to write like the greatest song of all time. Like that's my
Okay.
general goal, regardless of accolades or studio time. I'd rather like write the "This Land Is Your Land" or like just a song that people
Sticks.
remember. Yeah, I always tell people like, Amazing Grace. That went far. Like that song went pretty far. Like it was a hit.
Nobody's getting their royalties on them anymore. But
And
I was just,
no,
you're
but
absolutely
still,
right.
it's like what are you doing the work for? It's not about money. It's about like doing good work to me. To me, I definitely have this curse on my back that I can't really do anything 75 or even 95%. It's just kind of locked in. I have to like show
Yeah.
up 100%. So I focus on the music, but I think the first order of business, if I had some cash, it would have a full-time engineer and like a tech. That would probably be pretty cool. But I mean, I'm probably going to be going that like John Lennon approach. I don't know if you ever saw the movie or the documentary about Imagine, like when he made that record. I think it's on Netflix. I think it's called Above Us Only Sky.
Yeah, I think
And
I have seen that.
it's
Yeah.
about, Phil Spector came out and they built a whole recording
Yeah.
studio in John's house in England. And they have one of the very rare Wurlitzers, which would be a dream to have. I would get a red Wurlitzer for sure. But I would just buy a lot. I would probably buy like all the gear I want and just keep trying to write the best song I can think of.
Sometimes I'm drifting in a simple world, like a country stream, sleep to discussion, and I'm just so content. I see you smile, drifting like a country stream, my little girl, precious and pure, as I fall back in the softness and sleep. Caress me with simple love. Resist me with simple love. Special simple. Caress me with simple love. Resist me with simple love. Place becomes time, space becomes mine, and always like this flow. Green like a tree dream, you surround me and cover me, protect me and caress me with special simple love. Precious and pure, I see you smile, the slave to discussion of it's simple, and I'm so content, drifting special simple love, simple love. A special simple love, that special.